The first rays of morning sunlight struggled to penetrate the heavy oak-paneled windows of the Oak Ridge County Courthouse. Detective Sarah Reyes stood motionless, her reflection ghosting against the glass, a study in exhaustion and determination. 3 years of investigation had etched deep lines around her eyes, each crease a testament to sleepless nights and relentless pursuit of a truth that seemed to dance just beyond her grasp. Oak Ridge Valley wasn't just any small town. Nestled between rolling hills and dense pine forests, it was a place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were supposed to be impossible. Yet something had been festering beneath its pristine surface, a darkness that had slowly consumed the community's sense of safety and trust. The case files spread across the conference table told a story of mounting desperation. Photographs of missing persons, some young, some old, created a haunting mosaic of loss. Each image represented a life interrupted, a family torn apart, a mystery that defied conventional investigation. Detective Reyes had memorized every detail, every subtle nuance that might crack the case wide open. Emma Richardson sat quietly in the waiting area, a stark contrast to the adult chaos surrounding her. At just 3 years old, she appeared almost unnaturally calm. Her emerald green dress, carefully pressed by her mother that morning, stood out against the muted browns and grays of the courthouse interior. Her tiny hands remained perfectly still in her lap, fingers interlaced with a precision that seemed more suited to an adult than a toddler. Maria Richardson, Emma's mother, watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and apprehension. A social worker by profession, she understood the delicate nature of what was about to unfold. Her husband, Michael, a community liaison officer, had been instrumental in bringing this investigation to its current pivotal moment. The entire Richardson family seemed to exist at the epicenter of a storm that had been brewing for years. Judge Harrison arrived early, his weathered hands carrying a thick manila folder and a thermos of black coffee. With 40 years of judicial experience, he had seen countless cases, witnessed humanity's darkest moments, and presided over trials that would make lesser men crumble. Yet something about this particular morning felt different. An electric tension hung in the air, almost tangible, a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. The courthouse staff moved with a heightened sense of anticipation. Whispers echoed through the corridors, careful and controlled. Rumors had been circulating for weeks about this particular trial, about the mysterious circumstances that had brought them all together on this specific day. Journalists from local and regional news outlets had been camping outside the courthouse, their cameras ready, sensing a story that could potentially redefine investigative journalism. K-9 Officer Max sat near the witness stand, a massive German shepherd whose presence commanded immediate respect. His deep brown eyes scanned the room with an intelligence that seemed to transcend typical animal behavior. Decorated for multiple commendations, Max was more than just a police dog. He was a legend in local law enforcement circles. His connection with the case, and more specifically with young Emma, was something that defied conventional explanation. As the morning progressed, the temperature in the courthouse seemed to rise. Not from any physical heat, but from the mounting psychological pressure. Each person present, from the legal team to the support staff, felt the weight of expectation. Something was coming, something that had been building for years, and everyone knew it. Detective Reyes approached Emma, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "How are you doing?" she asked, crouching to meet the child's eye level. Emma's response was a simple, enigmatic smile that seemed to hold volumes of unspoken knowledge. It was a smile that didn't belong to a 3-year-old, too knowing, too deliberate. The courtroom gradually filled. Family members of those who had disappeared over the years took their seats, their faces a complex tapestry of hope, grief, and desperate anticipation. Each person carried their own version of the story, their own fragments of a mystery that had haunted the community for what felt like an eternity. Michael Richardson stood at the back of the courtroom, his professional demeanor barely concealing an underlying current of nervous energy. As a community liaison, he had been privy to information that most would never know. He watched his daughter, with a mixture of pride and something else, a recognition that what was about to happen would change everything. Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses, reviewing the preliminary documents. The case files before him represented more than just a legal proceeding. They were a complex puzzle that had resisted every attempt at solution. Disappearances that seemed random, yet somehow interconnected. Clues that led nowhere, yet suggested a deeper, more sinister narrative. Emma continued to sit quietly, her gaze occasionally drifting toward Officer Max. There was a connection between the child and the dog that transcended typical human-animal interaction. When their eyes met, something inexplicable seemed to pass. Between them, a communication that existed beyond words, beyond understanding. The clock on the wall moved with agonizing slowness. Each tick felt like an eternity, each moment pregnant with potential. Detective Reyes took a deep breath, knowing that everything she had worked for over the past 3 years was about to culminate in what might be the most extraordinary testimony in the history of Oak Ridge Valley. As the final preparations were made, as the last witnesses were seated, as the legal teams took their positions, one thing became abundantly clear. Nothing would be the same after today. The truth, whatever it might be, was about to be revealed. And at the center of it all sat Emma Richardson, a 3-year-old child who seemed to hold the key to a mystery that had consumed an entire community. The history of Oak Ridge Valley was etched into the landscape like scars on weathered skin. What had once been a thriving community of interconnected families and generational businesses had slowly transformed into a place of whispers, suspicion, and unspoken fears. The first disappearance had occurred 7 years ago, a moment that would forever divide the town's history into before and after. Margaret Holbrook was the first to vanish. A retired schoolteacher with no enemies, no complicated past. She had been a pillar of the community. On a crisp autumn morning, she simply disappeared between her morning walk and afternoon garden tending. Her meticulously maintained garden remained untouched. A cup of half-finished tea growing cold on the porch, her favorite cardigan draped over a chair. Everything in perfect order, except for her absence. Local law enforcement initially treated it as a typical missing persons case. Small towns were full of reasons why someone might leave suddenly. Family troubles, personal crises, the occasional desire to start over. But as weeks turned into months, and Margaret's absence grew more pronounced, a different narrative began to take shape. The Richardson family had been uniquely positioned to observe the unfolding mystery. Michael Richardson's role as a community liaison officer meant he was privy to information that never made it to public discussions. His wife Maria, a social worker, had her own network of connections that allowed her to piece together fragments of a larger, more disturbing puzzle. What made Margaret's disappearance truly unsettling was its precision. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, no financial transactions, no communication with friends or family. It was as if she had been methodically erased, not just from the town, but from existence itself. Over the next 3 years, 5 more people vanished. Each disappearance followed a similar pattern. No obvious connection, no clear motive, no trace. A local mechanic, a high school guidance counselor, a truck driver passing through town, a young college student home for the summer, and a local real estate agent. Different ages, different backgrounds, seemingly no common thread. Detective Sarah Reyes had been brought in 18 months after Margaret's disappearance. An outsider with a reputation for solving complex, seemingly unsolvable cases. She approached the investigation with a methodical precision that both impressed and unnerved the local law enforcement. Her initial investigation revealed subtle, almost imperceptible connections. Each disappeared person had been at a specific location in Oak Ridge Valley within 48 hours before their disappearance. A small intersection near the old Mill Road. Surveillance footage from that area was frustratingly incomplete, with critical moments always obscured or missing. The town's economic decline played a significant backdrop to these mysterious events. Once a thriving community supported by logging, agriculture, and small manufacturing, Oak Ridge Valley had been slowly dying. Businesses closed, young people left for opportunities in larger cities, and a sense of desperation began to permeate the community. Michael Richardson understood this desperation intimately. As a community liaison, he witnessed the gradual erosion of hope. Families torn apart by economic uncertainty, generational businesses collapsing, and now these unexplained disappearances. It was a perfect storm of social disintegration. Maria Richardson's work as a social worker provided her with a unique perspective. She saw the psychological toll these disappearances took on families. Support groups formed, conspiracy theories proliferated, and a collective trauma began to define the community's shared experience. Emma, their young daughter, had been born into this atmosphere of uncertainty. From her earliest days, she seemed different, more observant, more aware than typical children her age. Family members would often catch her staring intently at seemingly empty spaces, her gaze suggesting she perceived something beyond normal understanding. The local sheriff's department had exhausted traditional investigative methods. Forensic teams had combed every possible location, interviewed hundreds of potential witnesses, created complex geographical and temporal maps of the disappearances. Yet nothing concrete emerged. Rumors began to circulate. Some spoke of a serial kidnapper, others of more elaborate conspiracy theories involving human trafficking or even supernatural explanations. Local native tribal elders hinted at ancient land spirits and generational curses, adding another layer of mystique to the already complex narrative. K-9 Officer Max had been instrumental in several stages of the investigation. His ability to track scents and detect subtle environmental changes had provided the only consistent leads. During search operations, Max would exhibit unusual behavior, becoming agitated in specific locations, refusing to enter certain areas, displaying an intelligence that seemed to transcend typical K-9 capabilities. The Richardson family's involvement went deeper than most realized. Michael's professional connections and Maria's extensive community network meant they were often privy to information that never reached official channels. Their daughter Emma seemed to exist at the epicenter of this unfolding mystery. As the investigation progressed, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The disappeared individuals had all, at some point, intersected with a specific network of local businesses and community organizations. Financial records showed subtle, almost invisible, connections that defied simple explanation. Detective Reyes had spent countless nights reconstructing these connections, creating intricate wall charts that mapped out potential relationships. Each thread seemed to lead somewhere, yet always stopped frustratingly short of the conclusive revelation. The town of Oak Ridge Valley had become a living, breathing entity of collective anxiety. Every street corner, every local diner, every community gathering was infused with an underlying current of fear and anticipation. The disappearances had transformed the community, creating an invisible barrier between what was known and what remained tantalizingly out of reach. And at the heart of this complex, multi-layered mystery sat 3-year-old Emma Richardson, a child who seemed to hold secrets far beyond her years, with a connection to K-9 Officer Max that defied conventional understanding. The stage was set. The truth was waiting to be revealed. The story of K-9 Officer Max began long before his legendary status in Oak Ridge Valley. Born in a specialized breeding program in the mountains of Czech Republic, Max was different from the moment he entered the world. His lineage traced back to generations of working dogs, not just police dogs, but canines that had served in complex, high-stakes environments ranging from military operations to search and rescue missions. Sergeant Jack Holloway, Max's primary handler, remembered the first time he encountered the young German Shepherd. It wasn't a typical meeting between a police officer and a potential K-9 unit member. Most dog training facilities focused on standard obedience and basic tracking skills. But the moment Max was brought into the training center, something was distinctly different. The breeding program that produced Max was the result of decades of meticulous genetic research. Scientists and dog behaviorists had been exploring the potential for enhanced canine intelligence, seeking to understand the complex neural networks that allowed dogs to perceive and interpret the world in ways humans could never fully comprehend. Max represented the pinnacle of this research, a living, breathing testament to the extraordinary potential of canine cognition. During his initial training, Max displayed abilities that defied conventional understanding. Standard obstacle courses were completed with a level of precision that seemed almost supernatural. His ability to read human body language went far beyond typical canine perception. Where most dogs responded to basic commands, Max seemed to anticipate actions before they were even initiated. Sergeant Holloway recalled one particular training exercise that first revealed Max's extraordinary capabilities. A complex search and rescue scenario had been designed to test the limits of canine tracking abilities. While other dogs struggled with the intricate series of scent trails and environmental challenges, Max moved through the course with an almost supernatural intuition. He didn't just track, he seemed to understand the entire narrative of the scenario. The psychological bond between Max and Sergeant Holloway was unlike any typical human-animal relationship. Communication happened on a level that transcended verbal commands or physical signals. A mere glance could convey complex instructions. A subtle shift in body posture could communicate entire strategic approaches. Max's first major breakthrough came during a missing persons case in a remote mountain region. A young hiker had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and traditional search methods had failed. Max not only located the missing hiker within hours, but did so by following a trail that seemed to defy conventional tracking methods. The hiker was found in a location that made no logical sense based on the initial search parameters. Oak Ridge Valley Police Department had been skeptical when Sergeant Holloway recommended Max for their K-9 unit. Small-town law enforcement typically dealt with relatively routine matters: traffic stops, minor disturbances, occasional domestic disputes. They didn't anticipate needing a dog with such advanced capabilities. But the series of mysterious disappearances changed everything. Max became more than just a police dog. He became a critical investigative tool. His ability to detect subtle environmental changes, to pick up on microscopic forensic evidence, and to sense emotional and psychological shifts in human behavior made him invaluable. The connection between Max and the Richardson family, particularly young Emma, was something that defied scientific explanation. During community events, family gatherings, or routine interactions, Max would exhibit a protective instinct toward Emma that went beyond typical animal behavior. He would position himself strategically, always maintaining a line of sight, responding to her unspoken needs with an intuition that seemed to border on the supernatural. Veterinarians and animal behaviorists who examined Max were consistently baffled. His neural scans showed levels of synaptic activity that were unprecedented in canine research. Brain imaging revealed complex neural pathways that suggested a level of cognitive processing more commonly associated with advanced primate intelligence. Detective Sarah Reyes had initially been skeptical of Max's capabilities. As a seasoned Investigator. She had seen countless instances of anthropomorphization, the human tendency to attribute human characteristics to animals. But repeated experiences during the investigation of the Oak Ridge Valley disappearances had transformed her perspective. There were moments during the investigation when Max would become inexplicably agitated. He would refuse to enter certain areas, would alert to locations that showed no obvious forensic evidence, would react to seemingly empty spaces with a level of intensity that suggested he was perceiving something beyond human sensory capabilities. The relationship between Max and Emma was particularly fascinating. Where most children might be intimidated by a large police dog, Emma showed a level of comfort and understanding that suggested a deeper, more primal form of communication. They would often sit together, Emma's tiny hand resting on Max's fur, both seemingly lost in a world of unspoken understanding. Sergeant Holloway had theories about Max's extraordinary abilities. Years of working closely with the dog had convinced him that Max was more than just a highly trained animal. He believed Max possessed a form of consciousness that existed in a liminal space between animal instinct and human-like awareness. The scientific community would have scoffed at such suggestions. But those who worked closely with Max, police officers, the forensic teams, the community members who had witnessed his extraordinary capabilities, knew there was something fundamentally different about this dog. As the day of the crucial court testimony approached, Max remained calm, his deep brown eyes scanning the environment with a level of awareness that suggested he knew something significant was about to happen. He was more than just a witness, more than just a police dog. He was the key to unlocking a mystery that had consumed an entire community. And somehow, incredibly, 3-year-old Emma Richardson was intrinsically connected to this unfolding narrative. Time seemed to crystallize in that moment. The courtroom, a cathedral of justice built from decades of legal precedent and carefully measured words, held its collective breath. Every sound, the soft rustle of legal documents, the imperceptible shifting of bodies, the distant hum of the building's ventilation, faded into a singular pregnant silence. Emma Richardson sat perfectly still, her emerald green dress a stark contrast against the muted browns and grays of the judicial environment. To the untrained eye, she appeared to be just another child, small and seemingly inconsequential. But those who had been following the case, those who understood the intricate web of mystery that had consumed Oak Ridge Valley, knew something extraordinary was about to unfold. Detective Sarah Reyes positioned herself strategically, her entire career balanced on the knife's edge of this moment. Years of investigation, countless sleepless nights, mountains of evidence that had led nowhere. Everything converged here, in this room, with this child. Judge Harrison observed the scene with a mixture of professional detachment and barely concealed anticipation. In his 40 years presiding over cases, he had witnessed countless testimonies, heard thousands of witnesses. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the electric tension that filled the courtroom at this moment. K-9 Officer Max remained motionless, his massive form a study in controlled potential. Unlike typical police dogs, Max didn't shift or pant or display any of the usual canine restlessness. He was a living statue, his deep brown eyes locked in. A silent communication that transcended human understanding. The families of the disappeared sat in the gallery, their faces a complex tapestry of hope, grief, and desperate anticipation. Margaret Holbrook's sister, now in her 70s, clutched a worn photograph of her missing sibling. The truck driver's wife, the college student's parents, the real estate agent's children, all of them united by a singular burning question that had consumed their lives for years. Maria Richardson watched her daughter with a combination of maternal protectiveness and something else, a recognition that Emma was about to change everything they thought they knew about truth, about communication, about the very nature of Perception. Michael Richardson stood at the back of the courtroom, his professional demeanor a carefully maintained facade. As a community liaison officer, he had been privy to information that most would never know. But even he was uncertain about what was about to happen. The forensic team sat clustered together, their notebooks and digital devices at the ready. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead forensic psychologist, had spent months studying Emma's unique cognitive patterns. Her research suggested the child possessed an extraordinary ability to process and communicate information in ways that defied conventional understanding. Reporters from local and national media outlets leaned forward, cameras positioned, waiting. This was more than just a local story. It was a potential watershed moment in understanding human and animal communication. Then it happened. Emma's tiny body went absolutely still, more still than a child her age should be capable of. Her breathing became so controlled it was almost imperceptible. And her eyes, those remarkable green eyes, locked onto Officer Max with an intensity that seemed to create a visible bridge of communication. The silence was so complete that the soft intake of breath when Emma spoke became a thunderclap. 2 words. Just 2 words. But those words carried the weight of 7 years of mystery, of disappeared lives, of a community held hostage by uncertainty. Detective Reyes felt something fundamental shift in that moment. Years of training, of scientific methodology, of logical investigation seemed to dissolve. Whatever was happening transcended traditional investigative protocols. Officer Max's reaction was equally extraordinary. His ears, which had been perfectly still, gave the slightest twitch. His tail, previously motionless, made the most minimal of movements. To an untrained observer, these would have been insignificant gestures. But to those who knew Max, who understood his unique capabilities, these micro-movements were as loud as a verbal confirmation. Judge Harrison leaned forward, decades of judicial experience doing nothing to prepare him for what was unfolding. The 2 words Emma spoke were not just a statement. They were a key that promised to unlock a mystery that had consumed an entire community. The forensic team began furiously taking notes. Dr. Rodriguez's hands were shaking slightly as she recorded the moment. Years of academic research, of studying extraordinary cognitive capabilities, had led her to this precise moment. In the gallery, the families of the disappeared began to react. Some were crying, some were holding their breath, some were frozen in a state of anticipation that seemed to suspend time itself. Michael and Maria Richardson exchanged a look, a communication that happened in a fraction of a second, a lifetime of shared understanding compressed into a single glance. Emma remained perfectly calm. To her, this was not a dramatic moment. This was simply a communication, a sharing of information that seemed as natural to her as breathing. Officer Max shifted almost imperceptibly, his response a confirmation. That went beyond human language, beyond traditional understanding of communication. 2 words that would change everything. 2 words that would finally reveal the truth about the disappearances in Oak Ridge Valley. 2 words that would challenge everything they thought they knew about human and animal communication, about the nature of truth, about the extraordinary capabilities that exist just beyond our normal perception. The 2 words hung in the air like a physical presence, transforming the very atmosphere of the courtroom. Hidden caverns, Emma had said, her voice clear and unervingly precise for a 3-year-old child. In that moment, decades of investigative dead ends began to unravel with the delicacy of a meticulously crafted tapestry coming undone. Detective Sarah Reyes felt the ground shift beneath her feet, literally and metaphorically. Her initial skepticism dissolved into a mix of professional shock and pure, unadulterated wonder. Those 2 words were more than just a statement. They were a skeleton key that promised to unlock the entire mystery of Oak Ridge Valley's disappearances. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the forensic psychologist who had spent months studying Emma's unique cognitive patterns, began furiously taking notes. Her hands trembled slightly, a testament to the magnitude of what was unfolding. Years of academic research had prepared her for many scenarios, but nothing could have anticipated this moment. The forensic team sprang into action with a precision that spoke of years of professional training. Digital devices were activated, recording every microsecond of the proceedings. Laptops opened, screens flickered to life, and a complex network of communication began to pulse through the courthouse. In the gallery, the families of the disappeared underwent a collective transformation. Grief morphed into something else, a tentative hope that felt both fragile and powerful. Margaret Holbrook's sister, her hands clutching a worn photograph, leaned forward with an intensity that seemed to defy her advanced age. Canine Officer Max remained the picture of controlled potential. His response to Emma's words was subtle, a barely perceptible ear twitch, a microscopic shift in body posture. To the untrained observer, these might have seemed insignificant. But to those who knew Max, these were as good as a verbal confirmation. Judge Harrison's decades of judicial experience provided no framework for processing what was happening. He leaned forward, the weight of legal precedent momentarily forgotten, replaced by pure, unbridled human curiosity. Michael and Maria Richardson exchanged a look, a communication that happened in a fraction of a second. Years of shared understanding, of knowing their daughter was extraordinary, crystallized in this moment. They had always known Emma was different, but this was beyond anything they could have imagined. The initial shock gave way to a methodical investigation. Within minutes, geological maps of the Oak Ridge Valley region were being pulled up, digital overlays created, topographical data cross-referenced. The term hidden caverns was more than just a child's statement. It was a potential breakthrough that promised to rewrite the entire narrative of the disappearances. Detective Reyes began to piece together fragments of previous investigations that had never quite made sense. Subtle geological anomalies in the region, unexplained electromagnetic readings, bizarre local folklore about underground passages. Everything began to align with a terrifying precision. Dr. Rodriguez approached Emma, her professional demeanor carefully maintained. "Can you tell me more about the hidden caverns?" she asked, her voice calm and neutral. Emma's response was both illuminating and frustrating, a simple smile that suggested she knew far more than she was willing to reveal. The local geological survey team was summoned with unprecedented urgency. Experts who had studied the Oak Ridge Valley region for decades began to review their historical data with new eyes. Geological formations that had been dismissed as unremarkable now took on a sinister significance. Officer Max's behavior became increasingly important. Forensic animal behaviorists who had been observing the proceedings noted his reactions with scientific precision. The dog seemed to be confirming Emma's statement through a series of micro-behaviors that defied traditional understanding of animal communication. News of the breakthrough spread like wildfire. Local media outlets began broadcasting live updates. National news networks interrupted their regular programming. The small town of Oak Ridge Valley was about to become the center of a story that promised to challenge everything people thought they knew about missing persons investigations. Technological resources were marshaled with military-like efficiency. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, advanced geological scanning equipment. Every available tool was being deployed to investigate Emma's two-word revelation. The scientific community's initial response was a mixture of skepticism and excitement. How could a 3-year-old child provide information that had eluded professional investigators for years? Theories began to circulate, everything from extraordinary, intuitive abilities to more controversial explanations involving psychic phenomena. Michael Richardson's professional network went into overdrive. As a community liaison officer, he understood the delicate nature of the investigation. Information needed to be carefully managed, potential leads verified with the utmost discretion. Maria Richardson watched her daughter with a mixture of maternal pride and protective concern. Emma remained remarkably calm, seemingly unaware of the massive investigative machinery her two words had set in motion. Forensic teams began preparing for an immediate exploration of the potential cavern system. Safety protocols were established. Specialized equipment assembled, expert teams mobilized. The geological region around Oak Ridge Valley was about to be subjected to the most comprehensive investigation in its history. The two words hidden caverns represented more than just a potential location. They were a promise of answers, of resolution, of finally understanding the mysterious disappearances that had haunted the community for years. As the initial shock began to subside, a more structured investigation took shape. Emma's testimony would be meticulously documented, analyzed from every possible scientific and psychological perspective. Canine Officer Max would play a crucial role in the upcoming exploration, his extraordinary abilities now recognized as potentially instrumental in solving the mystery. The moment stretched, pregnant with possibility. The truth about Oak Ridge Valley's disappeared was tantalizingly close, hidden within a cavern system that had remained undetected, waiting to be discovered by a 3-year-old child and a remarkable police dog. Everything was about to change. The first hours following Emma's revelation were a controlled explosion of scientific and investigative activity. Federal agencies, local law enforcement, geological experts, and forensic specialists converged on Oak Ridge Valley like a coordinated storm, each bringing their unique expertise to unravel the mystery of the hidden caverns. Dr. Elena Rodriguez set up a temporary research center in the courthouse basement, transforming the space into a high-tech command center. Banks of computers lined the walls, each screen displaying different aspects of the investigation. Psychological profiles, geological maps, historical records, and real-time data streams created a complex tapestry of information. Emma Richardson remained the centerpiece of the investigation, though not in the way anyone might have expected. Child psychologists, linguistic experts, and cognitive researchers descended upon the small conference room where she was being interviewed. Their approach was delicate, a careful dance of scientific inquiry and childlike understanding. "Tell me about the caverns," Dr. Rodriguez would ask, her voice soft and measured. Emma's responses were frustratingly cryptic, sometimes a smile, sometimes a drawing, sometimes a seemingly random string of words that would take days to decode. Canine Officer Max became an integral part of the verification process. Specialized animal behaviorists brought in from 3 different research universities began a comprehensive study of his reactions. Every twitch, every micro-movement was recorded, analyzed, cross-referenced. Michael Richardson found himself at the center of an unprecedented intersection of professional and personal worlds. As a community liaison officer, he was both an insider and an observer. His connections within local law enforcement and his intimate knowledge of Oak Ridge Valley provided a unique perspective that proved invaluable. The geological survey team worked around the clock. Ground-penetrating radar, advanced satellite imaging, and cutting-edge scanning technologies were deployed across the region. What had once been considered unremarkable terrain began to reveal complex underground structures that defied previous understanding. Dr. Marcus Chon, a leading geological researcher from the National Underground Mapping Project, couldn't believe his eyes. "These formations," he muttered to his team, "they're not natural, at least not entirely natural." The initial scans revealed a complex network of underground passages that seemed to defy conventional geological explanation. Some sections appeared to be naturally formed, while others showed signs of what could only be described as intentional modification. It was as if someone, or something, had systematically altered the underground landscape. Forensic teams began preparing for an exploratory mission. Specialized equipment was assembled: high-resolution cameras, environmental sensors, advanced communication systems, and safety gear designed for the most challenging underground environments. The Richardson family became the focus of intense, yet carefully managed scrutiny. Maria, a social worker with her own professional background in child psychology, found herself in an unprecedented position. Her daughter was simultaneously a witness, a potential key to a massive investigation, and a 3-year-old child who needed protection. Local folklore began to resurface. Old-timers in Oak Ridge Valley spoke of strange stories, legends about underground passages, unexplained disappearances dating back generations, whispers of something existing beneath the town that defied conventional explanation. Dr. Rodriguez's psychological assessment of Emma was equally fascinating. The child displayed cognitive abilities that seemed to transcend normal developmental parameters. Her ability to communicate complex information was matched only by her seemingly complete lack of understanding of the investigation's significance. "It's like she's telling us something she considers completely ordinary," one of the researchers noted, reviewing hours of interview footage. To her, these caverns are as normal as a playground or a backyard. K-9 Officer Max became increasingly agitated as the investigation progressed. His behavior suggested he was responding to something beyond human perception. Specialized sensors monitored his physiological responses, revealing patterns that challenged everything known about K-9 sensory capabilities. The families of the disappeared gathered in a makeshift support center, their hope now tinged with a mixture of anticipation and fear. What would the caverns reveal? Would they finally get answers about their lost loved ones? Federal agencies began to take serious interest. The FBI established a temporary field office in Oak Ridge Valley, bringing in specialized investigation teams. What had started as a local missing persons case was rapidly transforming into something much larger. Technological resources were deployed in ways that seemed almost science fiction. Advanced quantum sensors, experimental mapping technologies, and cutting-edge environmental analysis tools were brought in. Each new scan, each new piece of data, added another layer to the increasingly complex puzzle. Michael Richardson found himself briefing increasingly high-level officials. His role as a community liaison had transformed into something far more significant. He was now a critical link between the local investigation and national-level agencies. The scientific community watched with a mixture of excitement and professional skepticism. How could a 3-year-old child provide information that had eluded professional investigators for years? Theories began to circulate, ranging from extraordinary intuitive abilities to more controversial explanations involving unexplained perceptual phenomena. As night fell, the investigation continued unabated. Temporary research facilities were set up, creating a small city of scientific inquiry in the heart of Oak Ridge Valley. Lights blazed, computers hummed, and the air was thick with the electricity of potential discovery. Emma Richardson slept peacefully, unaware of the massive investigative machinery her 2 words had set in motion. K-9 Officer Max remained alert, positioned protectively near her room, his senses attuned to something beyond human comprehension. The hidden caverns waited. Secrets that had remained buried for years were about to be brought into the light. Everything was about to change. The legal landscape surrounding Emma Richardson's testimony was more complex than any case in Oak Ridge Valley's history. Judge Harrison found himself navigating uncharted legal territories, wrestling with fundamental questions that challenged every established legal precedent. How does a judicial system validate testimony from a 3-year-old child who seemingly communicates through a police dog? The question became a philosophical, and legal challenge that would be debated in law schools and courtrooms for years too. Federal and state legal teams converged on the small courthouse, transforming it into a crucible of legal innovation. Constitutional experts, child psychology specialists, and forensic linguists worked around the clock to develop a framework for understanding and potentially admitting Emma's testimony. Attorney General Rebecca Winters arrived personally, recognizing the unprecedented nature of the case. Her reputation for handling complex legal challenges preceded her. With silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen countless legal battles, she understood that this was more than just a local investigation. This was a potential landmark case that could redefine understanding of witness testimony. The Richardson family found themselves at the center of an unprecedented legal storm. Michael's background as a community liaison officer provided some protection, but the intensity of the legal scrutiny was overwhelming. Their daughter, a 3-year-old child, had become the most important witness in a case that promised to unravel years of mystery. Legal teams began to construct intricate arguments. How could Emma's testimony be considered credible? What scientific and psychological frameworks could validate her statements? The challenge was multifaceted, bridging the gap between traditional legal understanding and the extraordinary circumstances of Emma's communication. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's psychological assessment became a critical piece of evidence. Her extensive research into Emma's cognitive abilities suggested the child possessed extraordinary perceptual capabilities that defied conventional understanding. Neurological scans revealed neural pathways that seemed to process information in ways previously thought impossible for a child her age. K-9 Officer Max became a central figure in the legal discussions. Animal behavior experts were called to testify about the extraordinary bond between Emma and the police dog. Their testimony suggested a form of communication that transcended traditional human-animal interactions. The families of the disappeared became unexpected legal allies. Their desperate search for answers provided a powerful emotional backdrop to the technical legal arguments. Each family brought their own legal representation, creating a complex web of legal interests that needed to be carefully managed. Constitutional challenges emerged immediately. How could testimony be admitted when the primary witness was a child who couldn't fully articulate her understanding? Legal teams began developing innovative approaches, drawing from child psychology, linguistic analysis, and cutting-edge communication theory. Judge Harrison found himself rewriting legal procedural guidelines in real time. His 40 years of judicial experience provided no clear roadmap for the challenges before him. Each decision would set a precedent that could reshape understanding of witness testimony, child communication, and the very nature of legal evidence. The media circus surrounding the case added another layer of complexity. National news networks descended on Oak Ridge Valley, transforming the small town into a global focal point. Legal experts were brought in for round-the-clock commentary, each providing a different perspective on the unprecedented legal challenge. Technological innovation became a critical component of the legal strategy. Advanced neural mapping, sophisticated communication analysis tools, and experimental cognitive assessment technologies were brought to bear. The legal teams were no longer just arguing law. They were exploring the frontiers of human communication and perception. Emma Richardson remained the eye of the legal storm. During interviews and assessments, she displayed a level of calm that seemed impossible for a child her age. Sometimes she would draw intricate diagrams that forensic experts found impossibly complex. Other times, she would speak in seemingly random phrases that would take teams of experts weeks to decode. The potential underground cavern system became a critical legal consideration. Geological evidence, forensic analysis, and Emma's testimony needed to be woven into a coherent legal narrative. Each piece of evidence was scrutinized with unprecedented intensity. Michael and Maria Richardson hired a team of specialized legal experts to protect their daughter's interests. The challenge was multifaceted, protecting Emma's rights, supporting the investigation, and managing the intense media and legal scrutiny. International legal experts began to take interest. The case promised to challenge fundamental understanding of witness testimony, child psychology, and communication. Academic and legal journals began preparing special editions to explore the unprecedented legal challenges. Experimental legal frameworks were proposed. Some suggested creating a new category of witness testimony that could account for extraordinary communication abilities. Others argued for a complete reassessment of how legal systems understand and validate witness statements. K-9 Officer Max became an unexpected legal asset. Animal behavior experts developed complex arguments about his role in the investigation. Was he a witness? A communication conduit? The legal implications were mind-boggling. The disappeared families. Legal teams began to coordinate, recognizing that this was more than just individual cases. This was a systemic investigation that could provide answers to years of uncertainty. As the legal arguments became more complex, the initial excitement began to give way to a more measured approach. Each legal team understood that they were writing legal history with every argument, every motion, every piece of evidence presented. Judge Harrison understood the weight of his responsibility. Every decision would be scrutinized. Every ruling would be challenged. The legal system was being asked to expand its understanding of truth, of communication, of the very nature of testimony. The hidden caverns waited. The legal system was about to be tested in ways that had never been tested before. Everything was about to change. The first expedition into the hidden caverns began at dawn. A team of 50 specialists, geologists, forensic experts, search and rescue professionals, and law enforcement prepared to descend into the underground system that had remained hidden for generations. K-9 Officer Max led the way, his extraordinary sensory capabilities making him an indispensable guide. Emma Richardson watched from a specially designed observation room, her presence both a source of scientific fascination and a critical component of the investigation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the child's reactions, noting how her demeanor changed with each update from the cavern exploration team. The underground network was unlike anything the experts had anticipated. Initial geological scans had suggested a complex system, but the reality far exceeded those predictions. The caverns were not a natural formation, at least not entirely. There were clear signs of intentional modification, passages that seemed to have been carefully constructed over decades, perhaps even centuries. Detective Sarah Reyes led the initial exploration team. Her years of investigative experience had prepared her for countless scenarios, but nothing could have prepared her for what they discovered in those first hours underground. The cavern system stretched for miles beneath Oak Ridge Valley, a subterranean world that seemed to exist in complete isolation from the surface. Advanced mapping technologies revealed a network of tunnels, chambers, and interconnected spaces that defied conventional geological understanding. Some passages showed signs of recent use, while others appeared to be ancient, preserved in a state of near-perfect preservation. Forensic teams began their meticulous documentation. Every surface was photographed, every trace of evidence carefully collected. The first shocking discovery came less than 2 hours into the exploration: personal belongings of the disappeared. Margaret Holbrook's distinctive silver locket, the college student's backpack, the truck driver's worn leather wallet. Each item told a story of interrupted lives. K-9 Officer Max's behavior became increasingly significant. He would stop at specific locations, his body language indicating something beyond typical tracking behavior. The dog seemed to be communicating, something that the human team couldn't fully comprehend. The technological resources deployed were unprecedented. Quantum sensors, advanced environmental analysis tools, and cutting-edge imaging equipment created a real-time, three-dimensional map of the underground system. Each new scan revealed more complexity, more mystery. As the day progressed, the nature of the discovery began to take shape. This was more than just a location where people had disappeared. This was a carefully constructed environment with its own ecosystem, its own logic, its own purpose. Michael and Maria Richardson watched from the command center, their professional training battling with the raw emotion of potentially discovering what had happened to so many lost individuals. Their daughter, Emma, remained the key. Her two simple words had unlocked a mystery that had consumed the community for years. The first survivor was found mid-afternoon. Sarah Linwood, the local real estate agent who had disappeared 3 years earlier, was discovered in a carefully constructed living space deep within the cavern system. Her initial communication was fragmented, her psychological state complex. She spoke of a preservation project, of being part of something larger than herself. More survivors were discovered. Not all, but some of the disappeared had been living in this underground world. Their stories began to emerge, a narrative that challenged everything the community thought they knew about the disappearances. The scientific community watched in real time. International experts were brought in to analyze the emerging data. This was more than a local investigation. This was a discovery that promised to rewrite understanding of human behavior, of community, of survival. Emma Richardson's role became increasingly clear. Her extraordinary perceptual abilities had allowed her to understand something that others could not. The connection with K-9 Officer Max was more than just a bond between a child and a dog. It was a form of communication that transcended traditional understanding. By evening, the initial exploration had revealed the broad strokes of an extraordinary story. The cavern system was part of a long-term social experiment, a hidden community that had been developing for decades. Those who disappeared hadn't been victims of a crime. They had been participants in a radical social project that sought to create an alternative way of living. And motivations were complex. Economic decline, social fragmentation, a desire to create a different kind of community. These were the driving forces behind the underground society. Some had joined willingly, others had been carefully selected, integrated into a system that existed entirely separate from the world above. Oak Ridge Valley would never be the same. The disappearances that had haunted the community for years were now revealed to be something entirely different from what anyone had imagined. A hidden world, a parallel society, had been developing right beneath their feet. K-9 Officer Max continued to play a crucial role, his ability to navigate and understand the cavern system proving invaluable. The bond between the dog and Emma seemed to be the key to understanding the deeper layers of the discovery. As night fell, the initial shock began to give way to a more nuanced understanding. Press conferences were held, preliminary reports released. The world was about to learn about the extraordinary hidden world beneath Oak Ridge Valley. The Richardson family found themselves at the center of a discovery that would reshape understanding of community, of survival, of human potential. Their daughter, a 3-year-old child, had been the key to unlocking a mystery that had consumed an entire community. Detective Reyes understood that this was more than just an investigation. This was a fundamental reimagining of what was possible. Everything had changed, and it all began with 2 simple words from a child.